The ACU had rounded up the help of all the motorcycle clubs in the north of England to help the Isle of Man Centre put on the 1975 ISDT. We all travelled in vans and cars from Liverpool on one of the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company boats. The 4-hour journey passed in a haze of beer and sweaty socks. We pulled into the harbour at Douglas and then had a bit of time to go out and sample the delights of the island, including the big wheel at Laxey. Once the event got underway, of course, we'd have no time for sightseeing, as this was the 50th running of the ISDT. Harry Shuttleworth, a jeweller from Tottenham, was the chief timekeeper, and he would celebrate his 70th birthday on the island. Involved in the ISDT since 1937, he led a team of dedicated people in charge of 9 time checks. The South Liverpool Motor Club provided one of the time check teams. Club member Ken Franklin was charged with controlling all the travelling marshals, a motley bunch of what today would be called trail riders. Your film cameraman, Dot, was out riding a Bultaco Sherpa trials bike. At the opening ceremony, held in front of 2,000 people, including members from 17 countries, all gathered in the Palace Lido ballroom. The FIM jury president, Juan Solo Bulto, referred to Great Britain as the cradle of motorcycle sport, and to the Isle of Man as an incomparable venue for the 50th ISDT. British team manager Ken Haynes, shown here taking part in an earlier ISDT, had shuffled his team when sickness laid low Dave Smith, who was diagnosed with glandular fever and rushed to hospital on the Saturday before the event started. Mick Bowers was also ruled out when the abscess on the knuckle of his left hand did not heal. So Dave Hobbs and Nick Jeffries were drafted into the trophy team, and reserve Ted Thompson and Elwyn Price were promoted to the silver vase. In all, there would be 10 trophy teams: Austrians on Pooks, Czechs on Jawas, British on Jawas, Dutch riders on Monarchs, while Italy, Sweden and France chose KTMs. Riders from the USA were aboard Pentons and the West German team on Zundaps. In the silver vase team competition, there were 13 countries represented, and the more unusual mix of machinery: Ozza, Simpson, MZ, SWM, Bultaco, Mako, Hercules, and just one Husqvarna. 42 club teams were represented, including the British Army Motorcycle Club, whose riders were George Webb on a 250cc Rickman Honda, Ken Applewhite, Bob Belton, and team manager Eddie Vaughan. The Motorcycle Club of Wales was represented by Roy Morris, Keith Gush and John Davis. But the very first casualty of the event was French trophy team member Jean-Pierre Mathieu, who broke his leg in Liverpool. He was waiting for his bike to be loaded onto the ferry, and he couldn't resist an opportunity to take the KTM for a spin, and forgot to ride on the left and crashed into a car. Scrutineering got underway, and keen eyes spotted that the Austrian-built 125cc KTMs were fitted with an all-new 6-speed KTM engine instead of the usual Sachs powerhouse. The lovely Zundap machines ridden by the West German trophy team sported revamped rear suspension and gas oil shock absorbers. The Italian Vase team were riding SWM machines fitted with Sachs engines. There were just 2 single-cylinder 500cc machines in the Parc Fermé. The very first 4-stroke 500cc Yamaha to be used in Europe, belonging to privateer American rider Gary Surdike. Only 2 Aussie competitors: Rob Haskins on a 250cc Montesa provided by his farm boss at Oberon near Bathurst, and Dennis Locke, who retired when the cush drive of his Ozza collapsed. But the machines attracting most attention belonged to the Hercules manufacturer team, fitted with Sachs Wankel rotary engines, which would be ridden by West German Fritz Weitel, American Doug Wilford and Italian Ivan Saravesi, all experienced ISDT riders. Other unusual machines were the 335cc automatic Rokon machines, one of which was ridden by American Ron Bishop. The bikes were fitted with electron wheels, hydraulic brakes and a manual pull starter, like a lawnmower. As usual, the Italian riders were very imaginative when presenting their machines for scrutineering. Trophy team member Emilio Testorossi raised eyebrows when his machine was found to have 3 legs. Well, it was the Aleman. He claimed the extra shock absorber was part of the KTM original equipment and should therefore be marked. When Emilio asked if he could carry the shocker anyway, the chief scrutineer Ernie Woods came up with a classic reply: "You can carry what you like, lad, providing you don't use it." So the event got underway on Monday morning with a course that would take competitors to both ends of the island, south to Port St Mary, north to Peel and on up to the Point of Ayre Lighthouse, before turning south back through Ramsey and Laxey to Douglas Head for the special test. 2 laps of almost 300 kilometres, which would be an easy ride for many. Another unusual special was the SCS, ridden, according to the programme, by Roy Morris from North Wales. The bike had a 125cc Sachs engine in a Shaney frame, and the initials stood for Smart's collection of scrap. It was one of Ivor Smart's specials, and I'm sure this is Ivor, at the start, taking over a ride from a non-starter. Running on B's schedule, it would prove to be an eventful day, and the very first British retirement was Army rider Bob Belton when he holed the piston on his greaves before the very first check. American Ken Mars broke an ankle near Dalby, but trophy teamster Tom Penton failed to reach Russian Abbey. His Penton caught fire when a chunk of foam from the air filter was set on fire by the exhaust and the bike was destroyed. Sadly, another American, Bren Moran, would lose his life in an accident when he crashed his Can-Am on a disused railway line near Peel. British rider Nick Jeffries crashed and dislocated his shoulder near the 6th control at Ginger Hall. Day 2 was the reverse of day 1, and Elwyn Price crashed on the second day, dislocating his knee just after riding up the slabs, where Willie Budden had caused a big pile-up. All sorts of problems had arisen, with protests from riders who clocked in early to those delayed by problems at the acceleration test in Kerristal. In the trophy, West Germany had led Poland, but after all sorts of machine and rider problems, the Swedish team had moved into second place. The special test up at Douglas Head was ridden each day and was a popular spectator viewing place, and allowed the motocross specialists to shine. Meanwhile, in the Vars, the Czechs had been lying second to East Germany but took over the lead, only to suffer badly on day 3 when they were reduced to 12th place. Day 3 was run over 2 laps of a new course in the centre of the island, over rocks and through forests and deep mud. Route marking for the event was done by a team from the Worcester Auto Club. Here is Jeff Chandler splashing through the water on his Ozza. Atrocious weather hit the island just when the schedule was changed to the faster A, and this really sorted out the men from the boys. Over 50 riders were late before the early check at Greba, and over 50 would retire. Trophy teams were decimated and some excluded, notably Czech trophy man Valek, who had presented his time card twice at the check on day 1. The South Liverpool Club timekeepers were none too pleased when one of the most experienced riders, John Pease, clobbered the table, sent the clock flying as he slid into the Baloo check. In the forest at South Barul, the riders came through thick and fast. And here's a rogue outrider amongst them, and he pulled over and then followed his rider through. Naughty. The mud near Black Hut was claiming many victims, amongst them the marshals from Kings Norton, when their recovery Land Rover sank in the bog and a tractor had to pull them out. Two halflingers trying to recover an abandoned 100cc KTM took over 3 hours to get the little bike out of the black stuff. No problems for the British riders, who are used to the mud. In the Swedish trophy team was Hans Eriksson on board a KTM 356. His son Anders would become a 7 times World Enduro champion. This part of the course was great for spectators and team managers. One rider stopped to ask for directions from the spectators, who were all quick to applaud a good ride. The motocross test up on Douglas Head gave former world motocross champion Jeff Smith on his Can-Am a chance to use all his skills. One of the travelling marshals is enjoying a ride on the test, as I watch alongside Peter Duke, son of Jeff Duke, the famous Isle of Man road racer. Thursday's route was the reverse and in a terrible condition, with many spectators and team minders out on the course to offer advice on the correct route to take. Manx Radio, the first licensed commercial radio station in the British Isles, was transmitting commentary every day. More drama on Thursday when Brian Higgins, British trophy team member, wobbled in at a time check with a lot of loose spokes in the rear wheel. Later he claimed that somewhere along the way the fairies helped him and the wheel was magically repaired. Meanwhile, the Italians aboard the SWM Tiddlers were taking command of the event while more and more riders retired injured. The course that had been declared by some on day one to be a doddle was claiming more and more victims as the weather made the going more difficult. One of the Czech trophy team ran out of petrol on the motocross test, and though cans of fuel magically appeared, he was being watched by marshals and had to push the bike to the finish line. Day 5 was another new route to the south of the island, and by now only 173 of the 307 starters were still going, and 9 of those were on 50cc machines. Dave Jeremiah on board his 250 Jawa was clean all week and on gold standard, and would end the event as the best British rider. Herbert Scheck, the giant of the West German Vars team, had a lucky escape when his Maiko went a bit wild. The sensational news on day 5 was about the mistake with the results, when points had been carried forward instead of being calculated separately for each day. A mistake claimed by the officials to be due to the wrong translation of the French regulations. At the Crosby Time Control, Alan Corns and his men had put the time clock on a table on the back of the pickup to avoid any more accidents, and he even had a shelter to keep out the rain. Here we see Jeff Davison, Frank Anderton, Bert Bowman, Barry Stanley and Jim Jones collecting riders' time cards for punishing. The duties of travelling marshals began each day by opening the course from the start or one of the time checks. I well remember riding down Grey Hill in the pitch black when trials might be on the lights. play at road racing. Legendary Alan Kipper Killip drove the official Morris Marina pace car to close the roads and lead the riders on the sighting lap. It was all great fun, and riders were given strict instructions not to overtake the pace car. Time for all the marshals to relax, get out the picnics and watch the fun. The Parkfield course took the competitors from the Glen Crutchery Road to Wollaston, Signpost and Governor's Bridge. And those still going really enjoyed the racing to complete 6 days that had covered many muddy miles in the glorious Manx countryside. The West Germans had 80 bottles of champagne on ice waiting at the hotel. They had to wait over an hour to celebrate the break of the Czech stranglehold on the event. Italy was second and the Czechs were third, but Italy won the silver vase with West Germany second and Holland third. Canada won the Watling Trophy, MZ the manufacturers, and the Czech club riders collected the club team prize. The event in the Isle of Man had been a huge success and everyone went home happy. Here's a photograph of the silver vase winning team from Italy. They're about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of their win at an event in Italy. In 2013, we organised a centennial rally and ride on the exact same day, 100 years since the first ever ISDT. The Mayor of Carlisle set off the riders who followed the exact course, including machines from 1913, which managed to get all the way around. The bikes may have changed, as seen in this photograph from the 6 days in Italy in 2025. And next year, the 100th event will be celebrated in Portugal. Long may this event continue.